You're listening to the Junior Birdman Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Junior Birdman Podcast. If you like this video, make sure you click the like button, make sure you subscribe to this channel, share this video, make sure you hit the notification bell for new videos when they come out. Today we're joined by an old friend of mine. He's a landscaper, gardener extraordinaire. He can probably tells more about plants than anybody I know. Been in business for many years. He's going to be giving us some insights into the whole business there site. And Bill, I know how you doing today. You've been doing this a long time. I heard you had a last kind of a tough week last week though. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thanks. Yeah, last week's a little bit challenging, but we're feeling good. Everything worked out okay, and we're all fine.
Okay. I heard one of your guys like wrecked a guy's garden or something like that.
No, we didn't wreck anybody's garden or anything. Not everything works out in this business like you expect, and that's just one of those things. But everybody's safe. Nobody was hurt, and everything's taken care of now.
Okay. I'd heard like somebody was drunk and they'd run off into some guy's garden, or maybe they hit his house or something.
No, that's not true either. So we just not following directions, and that happens from time to time. But we didn't wreck anybody's garden. Nobody was fired. Nobody was drunk, and everything worked out okay. Everybody was safe. That was the most important thing for us.
Okay. That's true. Well, does that happen often? Do you have an issue with that, with guys maybe just blowing off work or drunk, don't show up, stuff like that?
Well, no, everybody I work with is really good. I have a really good crew. Everybody's really reliable. Everybody's really hard working. We don't really have any issues with our people not showing up. The people quit and they're having to go out and try
That's
to
good.
find people. Sometimes
good.
once in a while,
You're
but we
lucky.
got a pretty good crew overall.
Well, you're lucky then. I guess if you do, you must pay them pretty well. Do you think if they're that good that maybe they're getting offers from other guys, other companies that are looking for good guys?
Yeah, I'm sure my guys get offers every once in a while from other companies. But it's a competitive market. We offer them a good wage and we give them benefits and we do everything we can to try
Oh.
and keep them with us.
Well, that's good. No, that's good. How long have you been in this business? Was it a family business? Was your family in this? When did you get started?
I think you might know, Birdman. I've been in landscaping and gardening for over 30 years now. No, it wasn't something in my family. I fell in love with it myself. I built my first garden in the backyard. Yeah, I grew up in a rural part of the country, and my family had a small farm, but it was more for larger industrial style things. So I had my own little garden. I was really fascinated with
Okay.
plants and everything in the world and the nature and everything. And good old boy, and had my own garden. And once my daddy said I could go ahead and set up a garden, so I jumped at the chance and had a few small vegetable beds in there, some flowers, and soon I started growing bigger things in there and more things and had bigger beds, and then my daddy was real patient with me and letting me grow as much as I wanted back there. And it was a fun thing
Sounds
when you're
like
a
it.
kid.
Yeah,
You
sounds
create a
fun.
lot of beauty out of nothing, and I'm really grateful for everything it taught me and everything I was able to learn from that experience as a kid. And look what it's done for me now.
Yeah.
So.
What kind of things did you grow in that first garden you had back there as a kid?
Well, I think as a kid, mostly tomatoes and some lettuce, carrots, green beans, things like that. Things you'd grow in the South.
Are those probably the easiest things to grow in the South?
Yeah, I think those are probably the easiest to grow, easiest vegetables to grow.
Well, of those, then, which do you think is probably the easiest to grow?
I think tomatoes are probably the easiest to grow. Now people have tomatoes in their garden. Pretty easy to care for. You give them about 6 to 8 hours of light and water and fertilizer. You can grow them right from a seed, so they're real easy to grow. You can put them in little containers. You used to spike them up so they would stay up. Yeah, you get a good tomato crop. You can give a lot of tomatoes, and it's pretty easy to take care of.
Okay. Well, then, of those, which is the hardest to grow?
Hmm, I think I'd probably say carrots. Carrots are probably the hardest,
Carrots.
You gotta be a little more patient in carrots. The soil's a little looser. Yeah, you gotta drain better, and you gotta water a lot more. You gotta keep them cooler. So you can't grow them all the time. They're getting a lot more disease because they're in the ground. They're probably the hardest. You do it right, and you get some nice, crunchy, sweet carrots too. It's worth the effort if you do it right.
You mentioned disease, birds, bugs. What do you think they like most that you would have planted in your garden?
Well, they always like the tomatoes the best. That's a sweet, plump tomato. You give that to a bird or a bug, they're going to go to town on
Okay.
that.
Okay. Now, as a kid, I know you didn't have a lot of money. Couldn't probably go buy stuff. So, what do you do for fertilizer, insecticide when you're a kid?
Well, as a kid, I used to use things I could get my hands on, like toffee grounds and eggshells, and learn to use those to keep away bugs and birds, especially from the tomatoes. You always you keep your eye on having plants and make sure they're clean and nothing's really getting into them. Everything turns out fine, but you making use of what's your job when you're a kid.
Gotcha. Now, is it harder to keep tomatoes healthy or some of the other stuff?
When tomatoes are very delicate and very susceptible to a lot of diseases, blight, wilt, mosaic virus, fungal diseases. They can cause the leaves to turn yellow and fall off eventually and kill the plant. Wilts, another one of those fungal diseases that causes the plant to wilt and causes the fruit to rot. And you can get that mosaic virus. We get that, you see these yellow streaks on the leaves, and the plants don't grow. It kind of stunts the growth in them. Yeah, we don't have too much of a problem with that as long as you take care of them, give them proper maintenance, you give them good nutrition, you irrigate well, you properly monitor the plants, everything, and keep an eye on them. And, you don't have to have too much trouble with those kind of folks.
Okay. Okay. Do you still use some of the same things now? Some of the same fertilizer, some of the same insecticide, and that you were using when you were a kid?
Oh yeah. I still use all those organic methods still to protect my plants from the bugs, bugs, diseases. All those natural methods. They're still one of my best companions for planting, crop rotation, mulching. You want to promote healthy plant growth on your fields. Everything you can to kill pests and things that you're going to cause problems. I use some organic fertilizers. I use sprays to protect the plants from disease too.
How about your kids? You got into it as a youngster. Your kids into gardening too?
Oh yeah. My daughter had a garden of her own in the backyard, and she really loved it too. She loved getting her hands dirty, growing things in there. It was a great way for kids to learn about nature and the environment and the whole food chain too.
And what about the grandkids? Are the grandkids also into the whole
Yeah,
thing with
yeah, and the
gardening?
grandkids too. They're getting into gardening also. They love helping Grandpa out in the garden. They're learning about plants and the environment too.
All right. Okay. Now you're getting a little older. What do you think you prefer more? Riding around on the tractor, just taking in the sunlight and the breeze, or getting on your hands and knees, still digging in the dirt and picking weeds in the garden?
Well,
And
I'm
what?
getting a little older now, so I kind of have to ride the tractor a little more. But I think I still prefer doing the fine tuning work. I still have to get down on my hands and knees and pick the weeds and make the garden look perfect. I think that's really
Okay.
satisfying for me. Get down at the end and look and see that nice, beautiful garden. That's good exercise too. So
Yeah. I mean, raking's great exercise if you want. I mean, you have to stand, but
yeah, raking is good exercise. A little bit tedious,
yeah.
but very satisfying also once you see the results.
Okay. What do you think is your favorite flower?
I think, like a lot of people, my favorite's a rose.
Okay. Um, who do you think came up, by the way, with that whole concept of rose colors associated with love or friendship and all that whole?
Yeah. I don't know exactly who came up with all that. Looked, I had the red roses are good for love, or for passion, or for romance. I know white roses are good for innocence, purity. I know yellow roses are for friendship. Pink roses too, also are for friendship or admiration, appreciation. I'm not sure who came up with all that though, but
Well, I know red roses are good if you're in trouble or you get caught
Yeah, raises is always a great way to show something you care about, that you care
Mhm.
about them, and they apologize for a mistake you may have made.
And
So,
when do you think who came up with the whole idea of associating candy with roses when you're in trouble too?
well, I'm not clear exactly who started the tradition of candy and flowers. It was Hallmark, but I think this actually is probably the Victorian era. I know back in the Victorian era, there was a lot of language around flowers and communicating of flowers and different colored flowers, and I think that's what part of that started conveyed a message just with flowers and you give somebody a bouquet of roses back then. I know that's when some of that started, when you wanted to express love for somebody or apologize. And, I know the tradition still carries out today. And somewhere along the line, I'm sure somebody out there, like maybe it was Brock or somebody, decided to go ahead and add candy to the mix,
Yeah.
too.
Do you think maybe a smell had something to do with the whole roses and smell?
Oh yeah, I'm sure it did. I mean, I'm sure the smell of roses has something to do with it too. A sweet scent of a rose, long and associated with love and romance, and the wonder of the flowers, often given as a romantic gesture. The aroma of a rose is a link to love and romance. Been that way for centuries. Sort of the sweet, delicate scent of roses. People think about joy and peace and love. It's almost like a little natural aphrodisiac. And some people even say maybe the rose's mystical powers. They're even
Hmm.
used in some of the old days. They used some of those black magic season spells. They use them in charms for love. So I'm sure it comes from a lot of that too. And yeah, so I'm sure. Yeah, oh yeah, they get into all that. So I'm sure that's part of why the rose has also become a symbol of romance and love, and a lot tied to a lotion.
Is there something different about growing roses versus growing other flowers?
Well, sure, roses are really hard to grow. You gotta have full sunlight. They gotta be well drained. You gotta have good soil. They gotta be watered, fertilized. And roses are very susceptible to disease. You gotta really keep an eye on roses if you want to make sure you have good roses.
Okay. Um, do you use some of the same stuff though?
Yeah, I use some of the same organic methods I use for my roses and other plants. I use companion planting. I use
Companion planting.
crop rotation. I do a lot of mulching. I do whatever it takes to, promote the healthy growth. That's just has to. And I use some organic fertilizers, spray. I do whatever it takes to protect my plants.
Gotcha. Yeah, they have these flower competitions even I've seen where these people are like growing roses and earning ribbons and giving out these big prizes, making a big deal in the paper for them
Yeah, there's
and
plenty of shows out there dedicated to ruin just roses. Some of those shows offer big prizes, big awards, some very big cash prizes. There's competitions for roses all over the world. Really way to
yeah.
showcase your gardening skills if you want to get in one of those competitions. You
Yeah.
know, I've seen people who grow some really good roses in those competitions, and you're obviously it's really rewarding when you win a prize at one of those competitions.
Sure.
And of course you have to work really hard at growing your roses if you want to get in there. But
I remember this wild story I heard about these people in Europe a long time ago growing flowers, and then the prices like went way, way up, and then there was a huge crash, and everybody was left destitute.
you're talking
And
about the tulip mania that occurred in the Netherlands in the 1630s. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, there at that time there was a huge demand for tulip bulbs, and the prices went way up. People were paying
okay,
all kinds of money for them. They were finding all kinds of rare exotic bulbs, and people making all kinds of hybrids. People mortgaging their homes in order to get them, and
wow.
eventually it became so saturated, prices just crashed, and a lot of people were ruined at that.
How long did that whole thing last? The that tulip craze. How long before it?
Well, the tulip mania lasted for about 6 months, from 1636 to about 1637, early 1637.
All right. I'm sure it created a whole bunch of millionaires as well as a whole bunch of
We
poverty.
had a tulip mania, sure did. It created a lot of millionaires, and it bankrupted a lot of other people in a very, very short time. A lot of speculation. A lot of things are going crazy there in the Netherlands, and you saw the demand for those molds just go way up, and You saw
Yeah.
people really getting into it, especially the rich were really into the bulbs and having their
Yeah.
own gardens full of them and
Huge
paying
garden.
tons of money for these exotic bulbs. And,
Yep.
like I said, some of them mortgaging these homes and bankrupt when everything collapsed away. Then it later on for them. And, a lot of people worked out okay, but a lot of people really went down fast when the market went down.
Have there been other similar bubbles like the Tulip Mania bubble?
Well, your history is full of bubbles besides the Tulipmania bubble, like the South Sea bubble of 1720, the dot-com bubble of 2000 even.
What was the South Sea bubble?
Well, the South Sea bubble was created in England in the 1720. Speculators bought shares in the South Sea Company, and everybody rushed in to buy the company's stock, and then everything burst and everything crashed and left a bunch of people in ruin.
Oh, I was talking about what about bubbles related to plants or flowers or trees or
Oh yeah, there's been plenty of bubbles related to markets and flowers and plants and trees too. You had the rubber boom of the 19th century, which saw this rubber in Brazil and Malaysia, and then big crashes, rises after that, leaving a lot of people ruined.
how long did that last? That whole rubber thing.
The rubber boom lasted from 1880 to 1910.
I think right around that time there was this Japanese garden trend too. I was hearing about where everybody wanted to have these Japanese paths and bonsai trees and that
Oh
whole.
yeah, that fad started in the late 1800s when Japan was just coming to prominence, and they had, everybody wanted to get a hold of those bonsai trees and build their garden like a Japanese garden, and it was a big bubble, and eventually over prices crashed, and everybody had big losses. There was another bonsai tree bubble a little later on, but that first one's the one
Oh,
that got everybody interested in them, and everybody heard the name bonsai after the first time. And they're still popular. They're still popular today. Obviously, you can still get them, but boy, they really caused a lot of problem back then when they first hit the scene.
who was the president back there at that time?
President of the United States then was Grover Cleveland during the bonsai craze.
Oh, and he was the guy who won twice, but not two times in a row, right?
That's
Wasn't?
correct. Grover Cleveland was the only president who ever served two non-consecutive terms.
I wonder if that whole thing affected his election at all. You think maybe that was even?
The bonsai craze, I believe, was during his first term, from
Oh,
85
okay.
to
Well,
89.
but maybe that still
Yeah, I
could.
think that was his. No, it wouldn't have cost him the election or anything. I think the bubble had burst long by then. But
Okay. Have there been any other kind of fads or anything in the 20th century?
yeah, there's been several fads since the 1900s. The rose fads in the early 1900s were big. The lilas came really big in the early 1900s. The victory garden movement of the 30s and
Victory Garden.
40s, people
Yeah,
were doing all kinds of vegetable gardening
that was around
then.
your
And,
time. Yeah.
that was
Sure.
in my time back then. And then when I kind of got older in the 40s,
Mm-hmm.
50s, you saw housewives bringing the houseplants into the picture. And then there was another bonsai tree phase. People looking into the shade trees that artist Disney was taking off in the
Yeah,
60s and
that's
70s,
right.
and then container gardening, and then we got into all these plants and air plants, and so
Yeah.
there's been a lot of trends and a lot of crazes through the whole century, last century.
So you were part of the Victory Garden movement actually at the time. You were actually part of the
Yeah, I
whole.
was part of that whole Victory Garden movement. And yeah, I
Yeah.
remember that was when I started my small garden in the backyard, and my parents helping me with it, and a lot of memories, a lot of memories.
You mentioned air plants. So what about orchids? Aren't orchids like really, really hard to grow and really hard to take care of?
Orchids are hard to grow because you got to have specific conditions to make them grow. Got to have a lot of humidity, indirect light, very important, temperature, water levels. If you don't have good conditions, orchids start to suffer and become unhealthy. And so you got to put a lot of effort, a lot of hard work into making your orchids beautiful, long lasting. It's worth it if you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I know you can make a ton of money with orchids if you're able to really, do them
Oh
right.
yeah, you can make a lot of money growing orchids, but like I said, you got to have a lot of knowledge. You got to have a lot of patience. Orchid growers, They have the most deep understanding of caring for plants of anybody. They really have to focus on making sure they have ideal conditions
Mm-hmm.
for orchids. You gotta really keep an eye on them. Make sure you look at problems they may be having right away. Growing orchids can be really good looking at business, but it's a lot of work too. It's a lot of work.
There was another big orchid craze not too long ago too. Like orchids were going nuts, right?
That's right. There was a big orchid craze in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. Orchids, once again, got real trendy as a house plant, real popular. And people started developing all kinds of new varieties and codes of
Yeah.
orchids and started to appear at shows. And yeah, eventually died down again, but it got
Yeah.
real popular there again
I
for a little
remember.
while.
I remember that. I mean, I get the feeling they're always going to be in high demand, though, right? I mean, orchids are beautiful, so
Well, demand for orchids will always be high.
yeah.
People just like orchids. They like growing orchids, even if it's just as a hobby. They're a good choice for gifts and special occasions. There's always new varieties coming out, new colors. People are always trying to find new ways to showcase them. So people are always going to be wanting orchids.
Are there some orchids that are harder to take care of than others, or pretty much the same?
Yeah, of course, some are harder to grow than others. The Phalaenopsis is considered easier to grow.
What's
Um,
what's that one called? What's the name of the one you said that's harder to grow? What's it called?
I like the Phalaenopsis.
Oh, okay. What is it?
Phalaenopsis. They call it the
Phalaenopsis.
moth orchid too. It
Moth
has
orchid.
these big
Okay.
long blooms. Has a big wide. It has you put it in a wide range of temperatures, light levels. It's a nice plant. Very easy orchid to take care of.
Okay.
Um,
Putting it on the
Good for
screen.
novice growers, good
Okay.
for serious growers. I really like it. It's got delicate, nice white pink flowers. That's
Yeah.
yeah, good
Yeah.
touch of
Look at that.
beauty,
Yeah.
elegance to any room.
Yeah. Very
Uh,
nice.
Probably
Yeah.
my favorite for sure.
Yeah. How often do these bloom? Do these bloom like every few months or
Phalaenopsis mean about once a year,
once?
usually in the spring, maybe the summer. Can last for quite a few weeks. You can
Gotcha.
even get them to rebloom if you encourage them.
Rebloom. How do you get them to rebloom?
Well, it's a little bit of luck and making sure you have the right conditions, the right light, the right temperature, watering, making sure you have the right fertilizer and everything else, and that all helps reblooming.
Okay. Well, since you mentioned fertilizer, we can talk a little bit about that. What kind of fertilizer would you use for orchids?
Well, fertilizing orchids, is like a typical fertilizer. You're going to have equal arcs of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. They usually label that 20-20-20 or 30-10-10. You want to dilute the fertilizer a little bit, so it's about half the strength. You look at the label to make sure, but that's probably a good blend for orchids.
What do nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium do for plants?
Well, nitrogen is really healthy for any vegetation. Helps the foliage. It helps produce the proteins, enzymes. Chlorophyll comes out of nitrogen. Helps produce healthy stems and limbs. And phosphorus helps promote the flower and the root growth. Is phosphorus really important for that? And potassium helps matter of the overall growth of the plant, helps regulate water and nutrient uptake. So you got to kind of have them all in the right balance. All of them together help with disease and make strong cell walls of the plant. That's very important for the growth and development. And so you got to have a good balance of all three in fertilizer.
So, do you use the same fertilizer on orchids that you would use like on your grass or your lawn in the front yard?
Well, the fertilizer you're going to use on your lawn contains more of nitrogen than anything else.
Nitrogen. Okay.
For orchids and vegetables, you're going to balance it out. But for the lawn, your fertilizer is going to be much higher in nitrogen, maybe like 24-10-16 or 15-5-10, something like that.
Okay.
Because those fertilizers are designed more for healthy grass growth. They get down to the roots a lot more. If you're going to be doing orchids and vegetables, you want a more balanced fertilizer. Like I said, like a 20-20-20, maybe even
Okay.
want to go to a 30-10-10 if anything. But you don't want as much of the nitrogen in it. You want to have that. Really, if you're good at for grass, you want to make sure you have more of the nitrogen in there, but not so much for the orchids and if you're going to be growing vegetables.
But you said potassium is good to prevent disease, right? For plants?
Yeah, potassium usually helps plants with disease and helps them regulate water and nutrient uptake. Like I said, it helps the cell walls get stronger, helps them prevent disease. It kind of keeps them stress free, so they're a little more resistant to disease too.
So plants feel stress?
Oh yeah, plants get stressed out just like humans
Hmm,
do. They get stressed
okay.
out with the environmental conditions. So you'll see drought, excessive heat, cold, things like that will really impact them obviously, and it becomes very stressful. That ends up making them more susceptible to disease and other
Hmm.
pests. And when plants are stressed, they become more susceptible to those things.
Hmm.
So you got to make sure they have enough potassium to help reduce the stress. That's probably the most important thing.
Do you think singing to plants helps them?
Well, Birdman, there's no significant evidence that shows that singing actually does help plants. Nothing scientifically anywhere. But some people certainly believe that talking, singing to plants can have a calming effect. And some people think it definitely helps reduce plants' stress. And some people say the plants respond to vibrations or maybe singing, talking. Ultimately, there's really no way to tell it. See, the plants really helps them grow, but it's certainly something to try and experiment with to see what happens.
What do you think about those studies? I think I've heard of these a long time ago where they would have one plant and they'd play like heavy metal for it and it'd die. And then they take another plant and they'd play Mozart for it and it would become like a big, huge oak tree or whatever and live forever or something like that.
Well, like I said, there's been nothing scientifically definitive on the subject, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised to know that certain types of music have a calming effect and others have a more
Okay.
stressful effect on plants. Vibrations, like I said, can affect them. And, there's really no way of knowing. Maybe you can certainly try and experiment yourself and see what happens.
What kind of other non-traditional things what are they that people could learn from? What kind of non-traditional things do you do that people could learn from?
Well, yeah, I practice and use a lot of non-traditional methods in my garden. I use companion planting. I use natural pest repellents. I use a whole variety of homemade solutions to boost plants, compost, tea, made liquid fertilizers. I also don't till. I don't till. I like the method of gardening helps preserves the soil structure,
Okay.
fertility. So I'm not into tilling. I also use natural methods to control weeds like mulching, interplanting. I like those methods much better. Those are non-traditional, but I found for me that keeps my garden much healthier.
I heard you say companion planting. What exactly is companion planting?
Well, companion planting is just a technique where you put two or more plants right near each other to try and benefit each other in a lot of ways. Sometimes it's for shade or protection from pests or soil fertility. Companion planting is good just as an overall efficient way to keep your garden healthy too.
And it's two different plants, or is it two of the same plants, or could it be either
You can do
way,
it both
or
ways. It can be the same plant. It could be two different plants. The idea is that they're for the benefit. You maybe have tomato next to basil, for example, or you could just put two tomato plants right next to each other in the same area. The idea of companion planting is to just you want to research and see which different combinations work best in the environment you're in.
but wouldn't they both, if they're right next to each other, wouldn't they be competing, for the same resources, water, soil nutrients, everything else?
Yeah, the plagues are going to compete for the same resources. They're in the same area. They're going to compete for water. They're going to compete for sunlight and resources in the soil. And, in fact, companion planting sometimes is intended for that purpose because maybe one plant causes certain things in the soil that benefit the other plants. So a lot of people, sometimes you're choosing companion plants based on what one will do to impact the soil or the water or the shade of the other, and sometimes that's the reason you use companion planting to begin with.
Right. So even though they call it companion planting, it doesn't really mean that it's to the benefit of both. It could be that one, benefits and the other just dies.
Well, yeah, that's right. It doesn't have to be mutually beneficial. Sometimes both benefit. Sometimes one plant benefits at the detriment of the other, and sometimes that's the purpose. One's there maybe just to shade the other, or maybe one's there to make sure that the other gets plenty of water, make sure to or how it impacts the soil around the other plant. And sometimes they're there just for beauty too. So that's another good reason people do companion planting.
Bill, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today, as always. Great information. Thanks for
It's been real fun
joining
talking to
us.
you, Birdman.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Bill. Well, you have a great day, and thanks again.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye there. Okay, well, there he is, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Junior Birdman podcast. Be sure to like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell to be alerted when new videos are posted.